The hallways of Pine Ridge High School were always noisy between classes. Students bumped into each other, laughed too loud, and slammed locker doors. But Zoe never added to the noise. She walked through the chaos like it was happening in another world, her brown eyes taking everything in while giving almost nothing away. Zoe wasn't exactly invisible. The teachers knew her as the girl with perfect homework and thoughtful answers when called on. She had been at Pine Ridge for almost 3 years now. But most students would have trouble telling you anything about her beyond the quiet black girl who reads a lot. That Monday morning started like any other. Zoe slipped into her first period class and took her usual seat by the window. She pulled out her notebook, the blue one for chemistry, and arranged her 2 sharpened pencils perfectly parallel to her textbook. Some kids might call this weird or uptight, but Zoe found comfort in order. Her mom always said, "Control what you can when you can't control everything." Ms. Rivera was writing equations on the board when the classroom door banged open. Heads turned as Tyler walked in 15 minutes late, not bothering to whisper his excuse. The teacher sighed and pointed him to the only empty seat, right next to Zoe. "Great," he mumbled just loud enough for Zoe to hear. "Stuck with the mute girl." Zoe didn't look up, she'd heard worse. Besides, she wasn't mute. She just didn't waste words on people who didn't deserve them. Ms. Rivera continued her lesson on chemical reactions, explaining how certain elements changed completely when combined with others. Zoe took careful notes, while Tyler tapped his pencil and checked his phone under the desk. When the teacher announced partner work for the lab portion, Zoe's heart sank. She knew who her partner would be before Ms. Rivera even read the names. "Can I work with someone else?" Tyler asked, not bothering to lower his voice. "No, Tyler. Maybe. Working with our top chemistry student will help improve your grade," Ms. Rivera replied with a pointed look. Zoe slid her stool a few inches away as Tyler reluctantly moved his closer. "Let's just get this over with," he mumbled. What most people at Pine Ridge didn't know about Zoe, what nobody knew actually, was that she wasn't just some shy bookworm. For the past 9 years, since she was 8 years old, Zoe had been training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at her uncle's dojo across town. 3 evenings a week and Saturday mornings, she transformed from the quiet girl at school to a focused athlete on the mat. Last summer, after years of dedicated practice, she had earned her purple belt, an achievement that had brought tears to her mom's eyes and a rare wide smile to her own face. But Zoe never talked about it at school. It wasn't a secret exactly, it just never came up. And she kind of liked having this other life that none of her classmates knew about. During the lab, Zoe measured chemicals with precise movements while explaining the procedure to Tyler in short, clear sentences. He mostly nodded and occasionally wrote something down, surprising her when he actually asked a question about why they were using sodium bicarbonate instead of sodium chloride. "Different reactions," Zoe answered, feeling a tiny bit of respect for him. Maybe he wasn't completely checked out after all, but then he knocked over a beaker of blue liquid, splashing it across their worksheet and onto the sleeve of Zoe's white school shirt. "Watch it," she said, jumping back. "Chill out, it's just water with food coloring," Tyler said, rolling his eyes. "Not my fault you got in the way." Zoe bit her tongue. She knew it wasn't just water. It was a weak base solution that could irritate skin. She went to the sink to rinse her arm while Tyler laughed with his friend at the next table. "What's her problem?" he said too loudly, acting like I tried to burn her or something. Ms. Rivera came over to check on the commotion. "Everything okay here?" "Fine," Zoe said quietly, returning to their table with a paper towel pressed to her damp sleeve. "Tyler, please be more careful," the teacher warned before moving on to help another group. The rest of the class was tense but uneventful. When the bell rang, Zoe gathered her things carefully while other students rushed out. She noticed Tyler had left their shared workspace a mess, with equipment still dirty and their half-completed lab report crumpled on the table. With a sigh, she started cleaning up. This was nothing new. Being invisible sometimes meant people thought you'd handle the things they didn't want to do. "You don't have to do that," came a voice behind her. Ms. Rivera was watching with a sympathetic expression. "I can mark down that Tyler left without helping." "It's okay," Zoe said, rinsing the last beaker. It's faster if I just do it. You know, Ms. Rivera said, leaning against the counter. Being quiet doesn't mean you have to be a doormat. It's okay to stand up for yourself sometimes. Zoe nodded but didn't respond. Her jiu-jitsu instructor said something similar all the time. You train not to fight, but to know that you can. As she walked to her next class, Zoe thought about this morning's drive to school. Her mom had been talking about her upcoming job interview, but then had suddenly changed the subject. Any trouble with those mean kids lately? She had asked, eyes still on the road. No more than usual. Zoe had answered truthfully. Her mom had nodded. Good. Remember what Uncle Ray taught you, but also remember, only when there's no other choice. Zoe had finished for her. It was almost a family motto at this point. Little did Zoe know that no other choice was coming sooner than anyone expected. And when it did, Pine Ridge High School would never see her the same way again. As days passed, the chemistry project deadline grew closer. Zoe found herself dreading each class period with Tyler. The blue stain never fully came out of her white school shirt, and her mom had noticed. What happened here? She'd asked while sorting laundry. Lab accident, Zoe had answered simply. Her mom had given her that look, the one that said she knew there was more to the story. An accident usually comes with an apology, she'd said. But she hadn't pushed further. Tyler hadn't apologized. In fact, since that first day, he'd become even more difficult. Zoe couldn't figure out why he seemed to dislike her so much. She barely spoke to him, only saying what was necessary for their project. We need to test the solution again, she said during Thursday's class, pushing the beaker toward him. You do it, Tyler muttered. You're so perfect at everything. Zoe paused. The way he said perfect made it sound like an insult. She picked up the beaker herself and continued the experiment, while Tyler watched videos on his phone under the desk. When Ms. Rivera stopped by their table to check progress, Tyler suddenly sat up straight and began explaining what they were doing, or trying to. He fumbled through the explanation, getting most of the chemical processes wrong. Actually, Ms. Rivera corrected, that's not quite right. The reaction you're describing would produce a precipitate, but as you can see, your solution remains clear. She turned to Zoe. Perhaps you can explain what's happening here? Zoe explained correctly, keeping her voice low but confident. She had always found chemistry easy to understand. Actions and reactions, cause and effect, everything following clear rules. Tyler's face darkened as the teacher nodded approvingly at Zoe's explanation. Excellent, as always, Ms. Rivera said before moving on. Teacher's pet, Tyler muttered when she was out of earshot. Zoe pretended not to hear. She was used to this, the eye rolls, the whispered comments. Being smart had always made her a target. Being quiet made her seem like an easy one. The following Monday, Ms. Rivera announced that project partners would present their findings to the class on Friday. You'll both need to speak during the presentation, she emphasized, looking directly at Tyler. After class, Tyler cornered Zoe in the hallway. Listen, he said, standing too close. I need a good grade in this class. My dad's on my case about college applications. Zoe stepped back slightly. Okay, so we'll practice the presentation. No, Tyler said, lowering his voice. You're going to do all the work, and you're going to make me look good. Zoe frowned. That's not how group projects work. It's how this one's going to work, Tyler insisted, unless you want things to get difficult for you. A few students walked by, glancing curiously at them. Zoe felt her heart beating faster, but her face remained calm. Years of training had taught her how to control her breathing, how to appear composed even when adrenaline was flooding her system. Are you threatening me? She asked quietly. Tyler laughed, but there was no humor in it, just stating facts. Do the project, make me look smart, and we won't have problems. He walked away, bumping her shoulder hard enough that she had to step back to keep her balance. Zoe watched him join his friends down the hall, all of them turning to look at her and laugh. That evening at the dojo, Zoe was distracted. She missed a sweep technique she normally performed flawlessly, ending up flat on her back on the mat. "Where's your focus today?" her uncle asked, offering a hand to help her up. "School stuff," she said, accepting his help. "The mind must be clear, to react properly," he reminded her. It was one of his favorite sayings, along with technique beats strength and respect yourself first. After practice, while helping roll up the mats, Zoe finally told her uncle about the situation with Tyler. "He wants you to do his work," her uncle summarized, shaking his head. "And he thinks intimidation will get him what he wants." "It usually does," Zoe admitted. "Most people just give in." "Are you most people?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Zoe thought about this on the bus ride home. She had spent years learning how to defend herself, how to use leverage and technique to overcome larger, stronger opponents. But she'd never had to use those skills outside the dojo. Her mom and uncle had been very clear. Training was for discipline, and self-confidence not for fighting. The next day in chemistry, Tyler acted like nothing had happened. He even contributed a little to the lab work, though his measurements were sloppy. Zoe corrected them quietly when he wasn't looking. "Make sure you include this part in the write-up," he said, pointing to the one calculation he'd done correctly. "I want Rivera to see I did something." Zoe nodded, but uncertainty gnawed at her. The project was worth 30% of their grade. If she did all the work and let Tyler take half the credit, she'd be letting him get away with his threats. If she didn't, would he really try to cause problems for her? The answer came sooner than expected. At lunch that day, Zoe sat alone as usual, reading a new science fiction novel while eating her sandwich. She was so absorbed in the story that she didn't notice Tyler and his friends approaching until they were at her table. "Hey, brain girl," Tyler said loudly, making several nearby students turn to watch. "Did you finish our project yet?" Zoe looked up slowly, marking her place in the book. "We're supposed to do it together," she said, keeping her voice even. "I've done my part." Tyler's smile vanished. He leaned down, placing both hands on the table. "Wrong answer," he said softly. "I told you how this was going to work." Students at nearby tables were openly staring now. Zoe felt her cheeks grow warm, but she didn't look away from Tyler's glare. "I'll help you understand the material," she offered. "We can meet in the library after school." One of Tyler's friends snickered. "She thinks you need tutoring, man." Tyler's face flushed with anger. "I don't need your help," he snapped. "I need you to do what you're told." Something shifted inside Zoe at those words. A quiet resolve that had been building since that first day in chemistry solidified into certainty. She closed her book and stood up, gathering her things. "No," she said simply. The cafeteria seemed to grow quieter, though Zoe couldn't tell if people were actually listening or if it just felt that way. "What did you say?" Tyler asked, his voice dangerously low. Zoe met his eyes calmly. "I said no. I won't do your work for you." No one at Pine Ridge High had ever seen the quiet girl stand up to anyone before, especially not someone like Tyler. What they also didn't know was that tomorrow, in the very same cafeteria, they would see something even more surprising. The cafeteria the next day felt different somehow. Zoe noticed people looking at her as she walked to her usual corner table. A few students she'd never spoken to before nodded in her direction. Word had spread about her standing up to Tyler. Zoe unpacked her lunch, a turkey sandwich, apple, and the cookies her mom had baked last night. She pulled out her book but found it hard to focus on the words. Her conversation with her mom after school yesterday kept replaying in her mind. "You did the right thing," her mom had said after. Zoe explained what happened. "But be careful. Sometimes when people like that get told no, they push back harder." "I know," Zoe had replied. "But I couldn't just let him walk all over me forever." Her mom had given her a long look. "Just remember what your uncle taught you, only when there's no other choice," Zoe had finished. "I know, Mom." Now, sitting, alone with her half-eaten lunch, Zoe wondered if she'd made things worse. Tyler hadn't been in chemistry this morning. His empty seat felt like a warning sign. She was about to return to her book when the cafeteria's double doors banged open. Tyler walked in, flanked by two friends. His eyes scanned the room until they locked onto Zoe. Without breaking his stare, he said something to his friends, and they all headed straight for her table. The cafeteria didn't exactly fall silent, but the noise level dipped as students noticed what was happening. Zoe took a deep breath just like her uncle had taught her. Center yourself, stay calm. Well, if it isn't the smartest girl in school, Tyler said loudly as he reached her table. He placed both hands flat on the surface, leaning forward. I missed you in chemistry today. We had a quiz, Zoe said quietly. You'll need to make it up. Tyler's friends laughed, though Zoe hadn't meant it as a joke. I'm not worried about some stupid quiz, Tyler said. I'm more interested in our project. You think about what I said yesterday? Zoe closed her book and looked directly at him. I already told you my answer. Tyler's face hardened. Yeah, well, I thought you might want to reconsider, given what's at stake. What's at stake? Zoe asked. Your reputation. Tyler smirked. See, I've been doing some digging. Found out you live in those rundown apartments on Wilson Street. Mom's a single parent, right? Works 2 jobs, must be tough. Zoe felt heat rise to her face. She hadn't told anyone at school about her home situation. Your point? She managed to say. My point is, Tyler leaned closer, people might start wondering how someone from that part of town can afford such nice clothes. Maybe you've got a side hustle, or maybe you're just really good at taking things that don't belong to you. Zoe's hands clenched into fists under the table. That's a lie, is it? Tyler shrugged. Who would they believe? The quiet girl nobody knows, or me? He gestured to the packed cafeteria. My dad's on the school board, remember? One word from me, and everyone will be watching you, checking their backpacks when you walk by, counting items in the lost and found. Some students at nearby tables were openly staring now. Zoe felt trapped, her chest tight. She hadn't done anything wrong, but Tyler was threatening to ruin her. Reputation with rumors, so here's how it's going to be. Tyler continued, his voice lower now. You do our project. You make me look good. And this conversation never happened. He pushed himself up from the table. Otherwise, by this time tomorrow, you'll be the girl everyone avoids. Something snapped inside Zoe. All the times she'd stayed, quiet, all the times she'd walked away, they suddenly felt like practice for this moment. This was the line she wouldn't let anyone cross. No, she said, rising to her feet. Tyler blinked, clearly surprised that she was still refusing. What did you just say to me? I said no, Zoe repeated, louder this time. Several heads turned their way. I won't do your work. I won't let you threaten me, and I won't let you lie about me. The cafeteria was getting quieter as more students tuned into the confrontation. You're making a big mistake, Tyler warned, his face flushing red. The mistake, Zoe said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, was thinking I would be afraid of you. Tyler's right hand suddenly shot out, grabbing Zoe's wrist. Listen, you let go of me, Zoe said calmly. Or what? Tyler challenged, tightening his grip. Last warning, Zoe said, her voice so quiet now that students were leaning forward to hear. Let go. Tyler laughed and yanked her arm, pulling her forward. That was his mistake. As Zoe stumbled forward, she suddenly shifted her weight, using the momentum exactly as she'd practiced hundreds of times at the dojo. In one fluid motion, she twisted her arm in a circular movement that broke Tyler's grip. Before anyone could blink, she had established her base and used his own force against him, redirecting his energy rather than matching it with strength. Tyler, caught off balance, stumbled forward. Zoe stepped aside, her movements precise and controlled. She wasn't fighting. She was simply refusing to be a victim. What the? Tyler caught himself on the edge of the table, nearly falling face first onto it. His eyes widened in shock as he turned back to Zoe. You. But whatever he was about to say died in his throat as Zoe stood tall, her stance relaxed but ready. 9 years of training had taught her body how to position itself without her having to think about it. Don't touch me again, she said, her voice carrying in the now silent cafeteria. Tyler's face twisted with rage. "You think you can embarrass me in front of everyone?" He lunged forward, his right arm swinging toward Zoe's face. Time seemed to slow down. Zoe saw the punch coming. It was telegraphed in Tyler's shoulder, in the shift of his weight, in his unbalanced stance. It was sloppy, emotional, exactly what her uncle had always warned against. Zoe didn't think. She reacted. Years of muscle memory took over. She slipped to the side of the punch, deflecting Tyler's arm with her forearm. In the same movement, she secured his wrist and used his own momentum to guide him forward and down. What happened next took less than 2 seconds, but to everyone watching, it seemed to unfold in slow motion. Tyler's body moved in the direction it was already going, but now controlled by Zoe's technique. He found himself face down on the cafeteria table, his arm locked behind him in a secure hold that didn't hurt him, but made it impossible for him to move without causing himself pain. Gasps echoed through the cafeteria. Phone cameras appeared from nowhere, recording the unbelievable scene. The quiet black girl who never bothered anyone had just taken down the school's most feared bully without breaking a sweat. "I don't want trouble," Zoe said clearly, still holding Tyler securely but not applying pressure. "I never have. But I won't let you hurt me and I won't let you threaten me." She released him carefully, stepping back to give him space. Tyler pushed himself up, his face a mix of shock, humiliation, and confusion. "What? How did you—" he stammered. But before either of them could say anything more, the cafeteria supervisor rushed over, followed closely by the vice principal. "What's going on here?" the vice principal demanded, looking between Tyler and Zoe. And for the first time in her 3 years at Pine Ridge High, every student in the cafeteria wanted to hear what the quiet girl had to say. The principal's office was quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock. Zoe sat with her hands folded in her lap, her back straight. Across from her, Tyler slumped in his chair, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. The principal, Mrs. Chen, looked between them, her expression unreadable. "I've watched the videos," she said finally. Zoe's head jerked up. "Videos?" "At least 20 students recorded what happened in the cafeteria," Mrs. Chen explained. "The footage is enlightening. Of course there were videos." Zoe felt her stomach tighten. In all her worry about standing up to Tyler, she hadn't considered that the whole school would be watching and recording. "I didn't hit him," Zoe said quietly. "I just defended myself." Mrs. Chen nodded. "That's clear from the footage. What's also clear is that Tyler attempted to strike you first." She turned to Tyler. "Care to explain your actions, young man?" Tyler shrugged, still not looking up. "It wasn't like that. We were just messing around." "That's not true," Zoe said, finding her voice. "He's been threatening me for weeks about our chemistry project. He wanted me to do all the work and let him take credit." "Is this true?" Mrs. Chen asked Tyler. "She's exaggerating," Tyler muttered. "It's not a big deal." "Harassment and attempted physical assault are very big deals," Mrs. Chen countered. "As is academic dishonesty." There was a knock at the door and Ms. Rivera entered, looking concerned. "You wanted to see me, Principal Chen?" "Yes, please sit down. We're discussing an incident between Zoe and Tyler that appears to have roots in your chemistry class." Ms. Rivera glanced at Zoe with surprise. "Zoe? But she's one of my best students. Always quiet, always respectful." "Sometimes the quiet ones have the most to say," Mrs. Chen observed. "Ms. Rivera, have you noticed any issues between these two students?" The chemistry teacher thought for a moment. "They're project partners. Tyler has been less than engaged, but I hadn't noticed any direct conflict." "That's because it mostly happened when you weren't looking," Zoe said, then immediately wished she hadn't. It sounded like she was blaming the teacher. "I see," Ms. Rivera said, her expression troubled. "I should have paid closer attention. The responsibility lies with the student who chose to behave inappropriately," Mrs. Chen stated firmly. She turned to Zoe. Where did you learn to defend yourself like that? The video shows you using what appears to be trained technique. Uncle runs a Brazilian jiu-jitsu dojo, Zoe explained. I've been training since I was 8. 9 years, Mrs. Chen calculated. And this is the first time you've ever used it at school? Zoe nodded. My uncle and my mom always taught me it's only for self-defense. Only when there's no other choice. Mrs. Chen studied her for a long moment. And today, you felt you had no other choice? He was going to hit me, Zoe said simply. And if I let him get away with that, it wouldn't stop. The principal turned to Tyler. School policy on fighting is clear. Normally, this would mean suspension for both parties involved. Tyler looked up for the first time, a small smile starting to form. However, Mrs. Chen continued. Given the video evidence and witness statements, it's clear this was not a fight between equals. This was an attempt at assault, followed by appropriate self-defense. Tyler's smile vanished. That's not fair. She embarrassed me in front of the whole school. You embarrassed yourself, Mrs. Chen corrected him. Actions have consequences, Tyler. You'll be suspended for 1 week, and when you return, you'll be placed on behavioral probation. One more incident, and you'll face expulsion. Tyler's face flushed. My dad won't stand for this. He's on the school board? I'm well aware, Mrs. Chen replied calmly. I've already called him. He's on his way to pick you up, and he's seen the videos too. I believe you'll find he's more concerned with your behavior than with your claimed embarrassment. Tyler fell silent, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. Mrs. Chen turned back to Zoe. As for you, while I understand you were defending yourself, we need to talk about how to handle situations before they escalate to this point. Am I in trouble? Zoe asked. No, Mrs. Chen said. But I'd like you to work with our school counselor on conflict resolution strategies. Your physical skills are impressive, but our goal is to avoid physical confrontation entirely. Zoe nodded, relief washing over her. I understand. When Zoe left the principal's office, she was surprised to find a small group of students waiting in the hallway. They fell quiet as she emerged. Is it true? A girl from her English class asked. You know martial arts? Zoe nodded cautiously. That was amazing, another student said. The way you handled him without even hurting him. Would you teach us how to do that? Asked a freshman girl who Zoe recognized as someone who often sat alone at lunch just like she did. Before Zoe could answer, her phone buzzed with a text. It was her mom, saying she was on her way to the school. The principal had called her too. I have to go, Zoe said. My mom's coming. Wait, the freshman girl said. Some of us were talking. We all deal with people like Tyler. Maybe you could start a club or something? Teach us how to stand up for ourselves. The idea had never occurred to Zoe. She'd been training for years, but always in private, always separate from her school life. I don't know, she said hesitantly. Just think about it, the girl pressed. Please? When her mom arrived, Zoe expected to be in trouble. Instead, after a long meeting with the principal, her mom surprised her. I'm proud of you, she said as they walked to the car. You defended yourself without hurting him. That shows real control. You're not mad? I wish it hadn't come to this, her mom admitted. But sometimes standing up for yourself is the only choice left. Your uncle will be proud too. As they drove home, Zoe's phone kept buzzing with notifications. Videos of what happened in the cafeteria were spreading through the school's social networks. Several students had sent her friend requests. The idea of suddenly being visible after years of intentional invisibility was overwhelming. Mom, Zoe said as they stopped at a red light. Some kids asked if I would teach them, like start a self-defense club or something. Her mom glanced at her. And what do you think about that? Zoe stared out the window, watching people on the sidewalk going about their day, unaware that her whole life had just changed course. I think maybe it's time to stop being so quiet. The next day, Zoe didn't go to her usual corner table at lunch. Instead, she found herself surrounded by students who suddenly wanted to know her, to hear her story, to learn from her. The girl who had been invisible for 3 years was now the center of attention. But the biggest surprise came after school, when she found an unexpected visitor waiting outside the main entrance. The unexpected visitor leaning against the wall, outside school, was none other than Tyler's father. Zoe recognized him from school board meetings that had been shown on the local news. Tall, with graying hair at the temples, he wore a business suit and a serious expression. Zoe's steps slowed. Should she turn around, find another exit? But before she could decide, he spotted her. "Zoe?" he called out. She approached cautiously. "Yes, sir. I'm Mr. Reynolds, Tyler's father." He extended his hand. Zoe shook it hesitantly, ready for anger or accusations. "I wanted to apologize to you personally," he said instead. Zoe blinked in surprise. "Sir?" "For my son's behavior," he clarified. "I've watched the videos. I've spoken with Principal Chen, and I've had a very long talk with Tyler." Mr. Reynolds sighed deeply. What he did was completely unacceptable. Zoe didn't know what to say. This was the last thing she'd expected. "Thank you," she managed finally. "But you didn't have to come here to tell me that." "Yes, I did," he insisted, "as a parent and as a school board member. We talk about zero tolerance for bullying, but sometimes we look the other way when it's our own kids causing the problems." He shook his head. "I'm embarrassed to admit I didn't see what was happening with Tyler. Or maybe I didn't want to see it." A group of students walked past, openly staring at the unusual sight of Zoe talking with a school board member. "Tyler will be serving his suspension," Mr. Reynolds continued. "But I'd like to take it a step further. When he returns to school, I want him to make proper amends." "How?" Zoe asked. "That's actually why I wanted to talk to you. Principal Chen mentioned some students are interested in starting a self-defense club, with you teaching them basics." "Is that right?" Zoe shifted uncomfortably. "Some kids suggested it. I haven't really thought it through." "Well, if you decide to do it, Tyler could help with the organizing part, setting up the space, getting permissions, that sort of thing." He met her eyes directly. "Not teaching, obviously, but supporting in a way that might help him understand the importance of what you're doing." The idea was so unexpected that Zoe didn't immediately know how to respond. Tyler helping with a club she might lead. "I'll think about it," she said finally. Mr. Reynolds nodded. "That's all I ask. And Zoe? What you did, defending yourself without causing harm, that shows real character." As he walked away, Zoe stood still for a moment, processing the strange conversation. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mom. "How was school today?" she typed back. "Different? Very different. I'll tell you everything when I get home." 2 weeks later, the small gym at Pine Ridge High School was filled with students sitting cross-legged on mats borrowed from the wrestling team. Zoe stood at the front, wearing the white gi she usually only wore at her uncle's dojo. Beside her, her uncle smiled proudly. "Self-defense isn't about hurting others," Zoe explained to the 25 students who had signed up for the first meeting of the Pine Ridge Self-Defense Club. "It's about protecting yourself when there's no other choice." Her eyes moved across the faces looking up at her. The freshman girl who had first suggested the club sat in the front row. 2 seniors Zoe had never spoken to before were taking notes. Even Ms. Rivera had shown up, sitting in a chair at the back of the room. "Today we'll start with the most basic principle. Awareness," Zoe continued, her voice stronger now. "Being aware of your surroundings and potential threats is your first line of defense." At a table near the door, Tyler sat checking people in, handing out permission forms that needed to be signed by parents. His first day back had been awkward. Some students had taunted him about being taken down by the quiet girl. Others had ignored him completely. But when Zoe had approached him in the hallway with Mr. Reynolds' suggestion, something unexpected had happened. Tyler had looked genuinely relieved to have a way to make things right. "I don't expect us to be friends," Zoe had told him bluntly. "But we can move forward." Now, as she demonstrated a simple wrist escape with her uncle's help, she caught Tyler watching intently from his spot by the door. When their eyes met, he gave a small nod of acknowledgement. Over the following months, the Self-Defense Club became one of the most popular activities at Pine Ridge High. Students who had never spoken to each other before were partnering up, learning to fall safely, practicing simple techniques that could help them escape dangerous situations. Zoe was still quiet by nature, but now it was a choice rather than a hiding place. People listened when she spoke. Teachers asked for her input. Even her mom noticed the difference. "You stand taller now," she observed one evening as Zoe practiced her teaching techniques for the next club meeting. "Do I?" Zoe asked, surprised. "You've always been strong," her mom said, "but now you know it too." The most surprising change, though, was in Tyler. As the weeks passed, his role in the club expanded from just handling paperwork to helping set up equipment and eventually demonstrating techniques as Zoe's partner. The boy who had once tried to hit her now respectfully asked questions about proper stance and balance. "Why did you give me a second chance?" he asked her one day after everyone else had left. Zoe considered the question carefully. "Because holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." Tyler looked confused. "What does that mean?" "It means," Zoe explained, "that forgiving you was for my benefit as much as yours. And because everyone deserves a chance to be better tomorrow than they were yesterday." On the last day of school before summer break, Principal Chen called Zoe to her office. On her desk lay a local newspaper opened to a story about the self-defense club with a photo of Zoe teaching a group of students. "I've been getting calls from other schools," Principal Chen said. "They want to know how our anti-bullying program works so well. I told them it starts with empowering students to stand up for themselves and each other." She handed Zoe an envelope. "The school board has approved funding to expand your club next year, with proper mats, equipment, everything you need." Zoe opened the envelope to find an official certificate naming her Student Leader of the Year. "I never planned any of this," she admitted. "The best leaders often don't plan to lead," Principal Chen replied. "They simply stand up when standing up is necessary." That evening, as Zoe walked through the now quiet hallways of Pine Ridge High, she passed the cafeteria and paused. Through the windows, she could see the exact spot where everything had changed, where the quiet girl had finally found her voice. She didn't regret having to use her training that day. But what made her truly proud wasn't the perfect technique or the dramatic takedown that everyone had recorded on their phones. It was what came after, turning a moment of conflict into a movement of connection, teaching others to be strong without becoming bullies themselves. The quiet girl who had once been invisible had found a way to help others be seen too. And that, Zoe realized, was worth breaking her silence for.